Absolutely.
I
I'm
think
sure I would agree with you on that one, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that I do need to be careful, clearly, but at the moment I'm just banging on quite happily doing what I'm doing because my idea, I genuinely believe that the cheating from ferryman hypothesis, and a lot of other writers and people are coming to me to say the same thing, could be the big thing that will be the paradigm changer.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go back. The further you go back, it seems the closer you'll get to the answers, in my opinion, from my own research and a lot of guys who travel in similar circles. It always comes down to the answers that you're looking for are not out there. They are all inside.
Look within, as below, as above, isn't it? The whole idea.
Yeah, that's it. And if you've probably started look at the Hermetic code,
yes,
and all of that type of stuff at the same time. And I'm big on sort of frequency and sound and vibration. And
very much so.
Yeah, and Johnny's into that as well. And he's got a lot of books that he's been reading here, and we always talk about sort of the effect on the left brain and the right brain depending on certain feelings or certain emotions, like being kept in fear. I know we talk about this quite a bit, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Just in the most primitive part of the brain, which is fight or flight. Just always, anxiety, always what to do or whatever. And just obviously, if you're in that state, you're not going to be things.
As long as we have a collective enemy to keep us in fear, be it Al Qaeda, be it Nazis, be it communism, we're never sitting back and looking at our own inner selves. And I do find this quite peculiar, just like I find it peculiar that so many people don't know about the implications of particle physics. If I didn't know any better, I'd say there was a conspiracy to ensure that people didn't know about these things. Most people in the street and the guy down the pub, his understanding of physics is 103 years out of date. It's simply sensational. They're still living in the world of Newtonian physics.
Oh, totally. I mean, some people's understanding of it. I mean, Niels Bohr, the physicist, Danish physicist, and one of his classic lines is, anyone who can contemplate quantum physics without getting dizzy hasn't properly understood it. And
Bohr was right. And the thing is as well, I mean, the thing that fascinates me, there's been 2 or 3 things that have happened in the last 25, 30 years, which should have been headlines. In 1981, a guy called Alain Aspect did an experiment in Paris called, strangely enough, the Paris experiment. They're really original, these guys. And in the Paris experiment, he proves something called superposition. The idea is if you entangle 2 objects and entangle them, once they've been entangled once, wherever they are in the universe, if you do one thing to one, it instantaneously transfers to the other.
Yeah.
The other thing, that using this entanglement, about 2 years ago, a guy called Anton Zeilinger of the Vienna Institute of Science sent 2 entangled particles between 2 islands in the Canary Islands, and they instantaneously communicated. This stuff is mind-blowing, but the public are not aware of them. But if you pick up a copy of New Scientist or Scientific American, it's full of them.
Yeah,
exactly. These guys are perfectly aware. This is teleportation. They're actually designing quantum computers now. And indeed, there's an associate of mine called Paul Bruni, Dr. Paul Bruni in America, who's then a member of my forum. He's actually doing work on DNA strands, and he believes he can prove Everett's many worlds interpretation of particle physics within DNA. Now, this stuff, it's got funding for this as well. This is amazing, amazing stuff, and it's so exciting. It's just taking the fabric of reality and pulling it apart and putting it back together again.
I mean, the interesting thing with going into the DNA that they say, something like 90% is junk DNA. When what is actually that junk DNA? Is it must be something like the consciousness affecting it.
I think we all know it's not junk.
Yeah. What is junk? What is junk? What is junk DNA? And indeed, what is dark matter and dark energy as well? So you have in the very small, we have this surfeit of substance or something, And then 93% of the universe is missing because it's dark matter and dark energy. What is that? That's the backdrop of everything. Whatever we perceive is such a tiny minority of what is really there. And we haven't got a clue what's really there at all. We just pretend.
You see, going back onto the left brain, right brain scenario, I think I'm only just about to start chapter 3 of your second book, but a lot of the stuff that again, it's a lot of the things that me and Johnny have spoken about before as well, and it's that the agenda does seem to really, really try and keep us very much left brain focused.
Yeah.
And I think I remember Angela reminded me the other day about some decades ago when kids were at school, if they came across the one that was suddenly writing with the left hand, they would tie the left hand behind the back and force them to write with the other hand. So you're obviously forcing the right hand to communicate with the left side of the brain.
Well, as they say, language influences everything, and the very term sinister means left-handed, doesn't it? So that really defines in great terms the idea of the way in which we are a left brain dominated society in a left dominated world. Whereas, if you look at in my first book, I have a whole section on split brain operations and the implications of when the corpus callosum is cut. Because as you probably know, that in the 1950s and 1960s, there was a series of operations done with patients who have severe epilepsy, whereby they would cut the corpus callosum, which is the structure, the muscle, for want of a better term, the band of nerves that holds together the right and left hemisphere of the brains. Yeah. And when they did these particular operations, the individuals affected, in effect, became two people. And you need to read the books by people like Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga. These guys found some amazing things about these people, whereby, as one of them, I think it was Michael Gazzaniga was quoted as saying with one patient that it's like the idea of there is a person in your head that you've been overruling all your life because they can never get a word in edgeways. And this is the non-dominant hemisphere of the brain. And I suggest that the non-dominant hemisphere of the brain is where the daemon exists. And I think that...
Yeah, that's it. Sorry to interrupt you there. That's another thing that's been corrupted, like the word sinister for the left-handies. The Greek daemon that you've obviously used yourself was corrupted, arguably, by the church into the demon term.
Yes, it was because it was part of the original Stoic tradition, and then moved into the ancient Roman belief systems, and then into the Gnostic belief system. The word daemon or daemon has been literally demonized. But then again, so is the word eidolon, which is the word I use for the lower self, because that has changed. The same semantic root is idol, as in worshipping an idol. An eidolon and an eidolon. So clearly the use of the language constructs the way we perceive reality. Again, there's something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that language, the way we perceive everything around us, is manipulated by the language we use. And it clearly is. There is no question about that language does. Sure. And you can demonize things. A lot of people in America, well, a handful of people in America that have read my book in America, a lot of people have read it, but the handful that don't like it very much get onto this. Why on earth did you call the higher self the daemon? Well, that's in deference to the guys who first came across the concept that we've forgotten about, and it's important to use the correct terminology.
If they're going to ask that question, surely they should have researched it, then they wouldn't have needed to ask that question, I would have thought.
Well, again, yes, but sometimes people feel comfortable. They're in their own educational comfort zone. And I find people either really relate strongly to what I write about and what I lecture about, or they find it profoundly disturbing and they just ignore it. Because, and the thing is, it was quite interesting. Last year, I was invited to lecture in New York, and I had about 350 people turn up to hear me talk at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan. In fact, the room where the famous "Greed is Good" speech was filmed by Michael Douglas in the movie Wall Street. I didn't know that till afterwards, till somebody pointed out to me. I thought, oh my God, I was on that stage. But in that audience, a guy stood up who was clearly some professor of physics at one of the local universities. And he naturally assumed that I was some kind of New Age flake, and he could easily make me look stupid in front of a large audience by asking me a technical question. He wished he hadn't done it.
Absolutely.
He really wished he hadn't done it. He walked out of the room. The reason being that in order to get across unusual and powerful ideas like mine, you've got to know your stuff, because people will take you apart.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's against what all they've sort of sometimes through their life been building up to, and then suddenly someone's challenging their whole way of life, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? No, it is, because it's challenging your worldview and what you're comfortable on. I've just noticed as well, somebody's asking about DMT.
Yeah, that's something we were definitely going to get onto straight away. And
yeah, because DMT is known as the spirit molecule, and a lot of work has been done by a guy I have been in contact with called Rick Strassman in America. And DMT is the most amazing substance. It was discovered, I think, about 1954-55. And initially, they were under the impression that it was a drug that just existed in the outside world. But what they've discovered is, in fact, it exists within the brain. It is part of our brain makeup. So DMT exists within our brains, which means we've evolved to have DMT in our brains. And DMT is the most powerful hallucinogenic. People, when they take DMT, have a total different perception of reality. They see beings such as greys. And indeed, one of the people I was interviewed by last year is a group of people working with the guy that wrote Communion, Rick's. Can't think of it. Brad Stein. I can't think of his name now. Brain's going dead. It's getting late. But effectively, all these things, are opening up channels of communication with an alternate reality. It's going back to almost Carlos Castaneda, shamanism and shamans, how shamans open up by using ayahuasca and substances like that.
Well, that's exactly what brought me onto DMT when I was, researching this sort of spiritual awakening in the whole 2012 issue. But when I was looking at ayahuasca...
Oh, is that how I pronounce it? Sorry, yeah.
It was... the testimonies of people afterwards were just blew me away when I was reading about it, and a lot of them were speaking about meeting a very powerful, often reptile-like being, and they also had the feeling of knowing absolutely everything. There was nothing in the universe they didn't know, and they were happy that when they came out of this ayahuasca ritual, they'd feel wonderful because they'd know absolutely everything. And obviously, when they came out, they didn't. Another thing that people have reported, which you'll know yourself, is they are very much humbled, and some of them obviously even see flashbacks where they may have upset somebody else, or they may have fell out, and from another angle, they saw the same scenario, but from another angle, really humbled them. So. That's what got me into...
It's the idea, isn't it, that people can have mutually shared hallucinations. Exactly. So in which case, the whole point, isn't it, the whole argument that psychologists will use about hallucinations is that they are not real because they're not consensual. Whereas if you actually have two people having exactly the same experience, it suddenly does become consensual, and suddenly the whole idea of it changes. Now, I've long argued that what is actually happening here with mind-altering drugs such as these is they are opening up channels of communication to the reality behind the reality. What Michael Talbot would argue would be or Michael Talbot and probably David Bohm would call the hollow movement, the holographic nature of reality behind the reality. Now, the other drug that I'm particularly intrigued in at the moment is a drug that mirrors in many, many ways glutamate, and that's something called ketamine.
Oh, yeah.